Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to ask everyone to hold your peace right now as we prepare for the mental health seminar. We're about to start, and so we're going to ask that you hold your silence. Please hold. I still hear people talking. I still hear. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Bedford Central's Part 2 on mental health. And what a challenging subject matter in the season of time in which we live. Mental health is an issue for many families and individuals and groups, and we are challenged to uh, look upon it face on and to help people who are going through mental health problems. We have with us today two individuals, Dr. Philippe and Angela, who are going to be our leaders in helping us in this endeavor to just try to look at the subject matter of mental health and how we might address that issue. And it cuts across all cultures nowadays. And if I may, y'all, it used to be a thing where folk would say that persons were crazy. No, folk ain't crazy. Folk may have some issues. They don't even have problems. They have issues. And how do we deal with the issue of mental health? So now I will turn it over to Dr. Philippe and also to Sister Angela.
Thank you, Reverend Annette. As Reverend Annette said, my name is Angela Reese Aris. I am a social worker in the state of New York. My population of specialty is children and adolescents, and I am here with my colleague, Dr. Philippe.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Philippe. I have a PhD in clinical psychology. I also have a license in mental health counseling. I specialize in children and adolescents. However, I work with a wide population, including adults, but ages 5 to geriatrics. Well, I'm glad to be here today. Thank you for having me.
Yes. Dr. Philippe and myself have worked together for several years, specifically in a clinic in East New York under New York Health and Hospital System. And we were here a few weeks ago to just discuss mental wellness in general. We spoke about how to define mental wellness and mental health, which was specifically looking at your actions, behaviors, mood, and thoughts. At that seminar that we had last time, we got lots of questions about coping strategies specifically and how to support children during the time post-pandemic. So that's what we're going to speak about and focus on today. So next slide. Okay, next one, thank you. All right, so to start off with the topic of children and adolescent mental health, we wanted to just hone in on how to tell if your child is struggling with their mental health or if their mental health has taken a change. So on the screen, you'll see a variety of behaviors in different aspects of a person's life. And we're gonna leave this up here for those who are taking notes and for those who are watching live. So first things first is watching your child's attitude and mood. Dr. Philippe, can you say more about that?
Attitudes and mood, yes. One of the things to think about is changes in ADLs, activities of daily living. In other words, their self-care. If you notice any changes in your child's rooms, for example, they stop cleaning, they stop brushing their teeth, they don't like to bathe as often. It's often a challenge in general, but however, these are some things to think about.
Yes, and in addition to that, you you know your child's personality, whether it's your direct child, your sister, brother, neighbor, family, friend. And so you would want to pay attention to if you're seeing a change in their overall personality. If they tended to be more outgoing and they become more reserved. Or even in the opposite, they tend to be a little more level-headed, reserved, and then all of a sudden they're more aggressive, they're more elated all the time, happy without matching the situations, or sad without matching the situations that are happening to them. If you notice that they're saying that they feel low, but you're not necessarily sure what is happening and they're having a hard time expressing what is making them feel sad or down. So that's what things to watch for attitude and mood. The next idea is behaviors with family, friends, and activities.
Social isolation is a major one. They begin to withdraw from the families as well as friends. There's something in psychiatry called anhedonia. They begin to lose interest in things like their video games, all the things that they previously enjoyed. So I think that's what you're talking about as well.
Yes, exactly. And if we're thinking about how children are doing, specifically now that COVID is the pandemic and the shutdown part of COVID, it's been about a year from that. They've returned back to school. However, they had internalized all of the messages that they were getting during the shutdown. So something that we're seeing a lot more of is that children are too scared to hang out with their friends in groups. Parents want to throw birthday parties, parents want to take them places, but they are saying that they don't want to be around people because of the fear of COVID. So this is something to very much hone into. If you notice that your child is expressing a lot of anxiety and fear around socializing with other people, that is a major indication that they are struggling with a piece of their mental health. Although this may seem like a normal reaction since so many children and people have started to express that, it is not a part of functioning that is going to help them in their future. So that's something you definitely want to get support around, and we'll talk about that more in the next few moments. In addition to that is sleeping issues and other signs. What were you going to say, Dr. Fleet?
I was going to say something a little while ago. Normally 20% of children in high school, 20% of children at high school age will show some type of mental illness or mental related problems. However, with COVID, we've seen an explosion. It's now, I would say maybe 75% of the children that I'm coming across are having all of these problems. So it's something to think about.
Right, and a part of this conversation as well is like how to use the parts of their lives that they see all the time to support their overall mental wellness. So a perfect example is school. A lot of times teachers may be able to see some of these changes first, since they do spend a lot of time in school. If your child is a part of an extracurricular activity, whether it's dance or basketball or in an art club, those adults may also be able to help with supporting your child in transitioning back into activities, because these are also trusted people. Another example, something to watch, is sleeping issues and eating habits. Sleeping issues is huge because, especially for the teenagers, it's kind of hard to tell if they're actually having sleeping issues or they just want to stay up and talk to their friends and be on social media. Something that you want to hone into is if your child is noticeably tired and saying that they're trying to fall asleep but are having a hard time falling asleep. They're saying things like, oh, I lay down, but I just can't, my brain doesn't shut off. Or I lay down, but my body doesn't ever relax and allow me to sleep. Or if they are sleeping too much. If you had prior to the pandemic or prior to when, this change comes, your child is sleeping maybe a normal 8 hours a day. They go to bed at like 12, wake up at like 7, and they're able to function. But you're noticing that they are having a harder time getting up. They're going to sleep earlier and waking up later.
Something to think about is also, social media.
Mm-hmm.
They're spending a lot of time on electronic devices, and that's also keeping them up at night. A lot of times they fake that they're going to sleep so the parents could leave them alone, and then they wake up, they'll get up again and stay on the computers all night long. A lot of the kids also, because they're not going outside, they're afraid to go outside, so they're spending a lot more time on the computers. And of course, now we're seeing electronics addiction. So please pay attention to that, because As you know, social media leads to all sorts of problems.
Right, and we'll speak about how to assist your child with social media in the next few moments as well. Just to wrap up the indicators, like Dr. Philippe said earlier, you can pay attention to how they're bathing, clothing, how they're taking care of themselves. Something also to pay attention to is how they're saying they feel, if they feel sick. So this is a big one that we see when we're doing intakes for new children who are coming to therapy at the clinic. The parents would say, all of a sudden they started to say they didn't feel good, but they couldn't tell me why. And we went to the doctor, and there's nothing wrong medically, but they keep saying that they don't feel good. They have headaches, stomach aches, they feel tired all the time, they don't want to go to school, and they have a very, very hard time explaining the why behind it. So that's a very, very easy one to see. Once again, it also ties into the tiredness and the fatigue as well.
It's called psychosomatic symptoms, where they're showing signs of medical issues, but obviously there's no medical data to support it. They go to the doctors can't figure out what's wrong with them. However, they continue to complain about the physical issues. But there's nothing there, but of course we know it's psychologically based or emotionally based.
Right, and a lot of it too, with anxiety, you'll notice that the kids will complain a lot about stomach aches. They don't want to eat because they say everything makes their stomach hurt, or it feels like their stomach is constantly turning. Butterflies, those are all indicators of a very, very strong anxious reaction in the body. Finally, talking about statements or jokes about death, not having a future, and or being a burden to others. So I wanted to just highlight the importance of the jokes, because sometimes with teens too, they'll joke about, oh, I'll just go ahead and die. I'll just roll over and die. And they say it in a playful way, and their friends will laugh. However, they may be very, very serious about this feeling. If you notice that your child is often like, no, I don't want to be a burden to you. I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to worry you. That is also a sign and symptom that maybe they are struggling with some thoughts and feelings that they're not sure how to express. And specifically with not having a future, not saying that they don't know what they want to do, but more saying like, oh, I'm never going to get there. That's never going to happen. Oh, I don't think about that because I'm not going to be that old. Like very, very pessimistic, very, very not considering what life could be, not even in a positive way, not talking about a vacation way, not, oh, I would love to see that. No sort of future thinking or communication about future at all.
One thing I do is assess what we're saying is hopelessness and helplessness. Hopelessness is what you said. There's no future idea. There's no future plan. But helplessness is not being able to help themselves. They're not able to get out of the rut that they're in. So when those two are high, there's a possible chance for suicidality. Also, there's an increase in drug use. And now there's all types of what you call those edibles. You don't smell it, you don't see, it looks like candy. There's an increase in marijuana use, now that marijuana is legal in different places. And also crime has gone up quite a lot. One kid described to me how he's involved in gang activities and other criminal activities. He said it's almost like a high. And from that high, you can't come down. So the criminal activity just increases and just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. It escalates. So we have to find ways to de-escalate or figure out what they're doing.
Right, and that seeking of that high feeling is also speaking to their baseline or their normal feeling day to day. That's also under self-harming behaviors. When we hear self-harming, a lot of times people think of the traditional things we see in media about like cutting themselves. However, putting themselves in dangerous situations, they can verbalize to you, they can tell you that they know that it's dangerous, they know that it was what's the word, like shaky or sketchy. They know all these things, but they continue to go back because of the feeling they get from being a part of these things. Also, picking and scratching. I noticed a lot of this with young girls. There's a lot of hair pulling, a lot of biting of the nails, a lot of picking at skin, eyelashes, picking scabs. That's another anxious movement. What other ones are you seeing as well?
I see a lot of leg shaking.
Leg shaking.
And also, the self-harming behaviors, the cutting. Mm-hmm. They're not cutting in the traditional places anymore,
right, exactly,
that are visible. For example, we used to see a lot of cuts on the arms. Please, please, please check their legs. I've seen the ankles, under the feet.
Back of thighs,
Yeah,
underarms in this range of the arm, because if you put your arms down, you won't see it. They can still wear short sleeve shirts, because that's also an indicator as well. A lot of parents know, like, oh, my child always wants to wear long sleeves no matter what the weather. They never want to put shorts on. And so, teens are hip to these things now. And so they're finding more creative places to self-harm. A lot of scratching on the ribs. It's easier to do in school. A lot of teachers report that they'll see kids kind of like grabbing themselves and itching. And if the teacher asks, they'll say, oh, what's wrong? No, I just had an itch. But whereas they're actually scratching and engaging in self-harm behaviors.
and also the infections they can get from these cuts.
All right, so these are just some things to watch for. Of course, opening up the conversation to your child or to your family member is most important, and because you don't want to just assume that's what's happening, but these are just indicators and things to watch for. Next slide, please. So we spoke a lot about what are things to look for. And these things that we spoke about with kids can also be applied to adults. So you can also use that list for your adult family friends, as well as older adults and geriatric, quote unquote, populations and people. So we're going to talk about how to support yourself and others, and that's in the category of coping strategies. So what's a coping strategy, Dr. Philippe?
A coping strategy is something that can help you take your mind away from the problem. It could also be problem-solving skills. A lot of our kids do not have appropriate problem-solving skills. And sometimes, as parents, we don't take the time out to teach our kids some of these coping mechanisms or coping skills. But it's something to really, really start to think about, because now with the pandemic, this new way of living, it's just getting worse. So we have to think about that.
Right, we have to be more intentional about the things that we create to make as coping strategies. So a coping strategy, like Dr. Philippe said, can be any action, thought, or attitude or outlook about the stressful situation that you have going on in your life. You use it to avoid the thoughts, feelings that you are having about the stressful situation. You use it to modify your reaction to the stressful situation. And these things are very intentional. You are aware that you're choosing this action to deal with the stressful situation. It's not something that's automatic, because the automatic ones are called defense mechanisms.
Right.
So Dr. Philippe, can you say a little bit more about that?
Defense mechanisms are other intrapsychic ways people use certain things to somehow remove themselves psychologically from the problem. For example, some children, they'll regress. What that means is all of a sudden the child starts to act childish. They use a childish voice. Some people project their problems onto others so that you're not looking at them as the source of the problem. So just some basic examples.
Right, and those are all examples of defense mechanisms which are unconscious, or you just do it and you don't realize that you're doing it. Or your kids are doing it, such as like the regression. You see that a lot when a family enters a new baby and the older child starts to want to crawl on the floor. They want to cry. They're using baby language. That's an example of regression. The child's not necessarily choosing to do that. They just do it in reaction to the stress in their life. And that also brings to the point that stress can be from good things too. So you can use your coping strategies to adjust to the positive things in life as well that bring more stress, such as a new job, a move to a new city, welcoming bigger family. So those are all of the things that coping strategies can help for. Next slide, please.
Oh, one more thing. We have to make sure that the coping strategies are appropriate or adequate, or not self-destructive. For example, I spoke about the drug use. A lot of people are self-medicating, but that can be counterproductive. Oversleeping, there's just different ones, but we could get back to that later.
Yeah, that's the next slide. We're doing the segue right into the next slide. So as Dr. Philippe said, that the types of coping skills that you use are important. What Dr. Philippe just described with the drug use and also with the self-harming, which are also the seeking of a pleasurable response, like we gave in the example of the young man who was engaged in like the gang activities for that high, those are identified as maladaptive coping strategies. These are least effective and have the smallest impact on your situation. So it may feel good in the moment, however, in the long-term addressing of your stress, it does not necessarily have an impact in a long-term way. So the opposite of that is adaptive, which are the most effective and long-term impact. And you were speaking to that before, so just say a little bit more about the adaptive.
The adaptive ones, adaptive coping strategy would be the ability to communicate. For example, to learn also self-talk strategies, instead of having a negative self-talk, oh my God, I don't feel good. I must be ugly today. I can't go outside because people are going to look at me. Start thinking of the strategies, more positive skills, more positive thinking skills.
Right, more realistic thinking skills. There's also the problem solving, as we talked about before, which we'll go into detail next. Relaxation. These are the most popular ones that you hear about in their news segments about how to deal with stress in the pandemic. There's been a lot of talk about the relaxation coping skills, which include deep breathing. They talk a lot about how exercise can help relax your body and address your nervous system. Meditation, prayer, yoga, these are like the big ones that everyone knows about. Some things that people don't think about are the cognitive techniques, which is what Dr. Philippe was just explaining with how to address your thoughts and self-talk. Your environment change, which is not necessarily that you need to up and move away from everybody and the stress that is causing you, but even if you don't enter conversations that you know will lead to negative outcome. So like, every time I talk to this person, they come at me sideways, and I already know that's gonna bring my blood pressure up. So I am not gonna speak to this person today. That is an environment change. Right. Communication skills. Then you leave and you go talk to your good friend and say, can you believe she tried to talk to me today? I can't have that today. And then your friend can say, you know what, I'll make sure that I sit with you at lunch, and that person doesn't necessarily approach you. So those are just some examples of adaptive coping skills. Was there anything else you wanted to say?
Yeah. Something I'm teaching the adolescents is this whole issue around people, places, and things. Mm-hmm. Avoid the people that causes stress or bring stress or negativity. Avoid the places and the things that causes stress. Now, the things are a little more complicated, but people, places, and things is something to really think about.
And these are all the things that you can control. In my therapy sessions with a lot of teens, I talk about their aspect of control. And I think this is something that's applicable to any age. We are in lives that sometimes are given to us. We have made decisions that we then don't necessarily agree with as time goes on, but we may not be in a position to necessarily shift it right away. So then you feel out of control. That's where the hopelessness comes in. If you're constantly just thinking, I can't do anything about this, I can't do anything about this, then you lead yourself into hopelessness and helplessness. So something I talk to the kids about is being able to focus your energy on the things that you can control, your daily routines, who you hang out with, the things you do in your free time, how you engage in the situation where there may not be a resolve yet. So the locus of control is very, very big at any age group, a big coping strategy you can use.
Another coping strategy is journaling. When the kids journal or write their ideas, their thoughts, their feelings on a maybe weekday basis, daily basis, and then to come back and talk about them. Another coping strategy that I've introduced to kids are hobbies. Not the PlayStations, not the typical things, but instruments. As you know, I play the guitar. I try to teach the kids how to play the guitar. Also, art. Art is another good one. But not just doodling, but express yourself on a canvas and let's see what happens. So different hobbies, I think, is something to look at. Also with adults.
Yes, for sure, also with adults. And just to go off of what Dr. Philippe is saying, that's something that I also do. I am not as musically inclined as Dr. Philippe. So I usually get my ideas off like YouTube, Pinterest, and this is something that I tell parents to do with their kids as well. A quick trip to the dollar store, you'll find some kinetic sand. This is a good way for kids to like play with something as you're talking to them about something deeper. Because talking about your feelings, granted, we do this all the time, so we could just do this, any time of the day, at any moment, or the drop of the dime. But that's not something that's necessarily comfortable for everyone. Range of comfort around talking about their feelings. So sometimes you may need your child to do something in addition to talking about their feelings, which is where the coloring comes in, which is where the instrument playing comes in, the using of arts and crafts, even using nature, going out for a walk, maybe going to a new place. Then they'll see things and they'll make them think about experiences and bring up those stories, and then you can follow up with well, how did that make you feel? They may be like, I don't know. Don't try to also work on giving them language to express how they feel. So I noticed that a lot of kids either say, it was good, it was bad. Well, that's not really a feeling. So was it like the happy range? And then maybe you can even go down where you're excited, like really big happy or really small happy. If it was bad, was it that it made you sad or more frustrated and angry? To help them develop the words to say to express how they feel.
Another good one is photography. With these fancy phones now, basically I tell a child, go outside and take pictures. Take pictures of, I would say, okay, today go to the park. Show me what you see. And then to talk about why they took those specific pictures, and then talk about them. Or why did you choose to take a picture of these people? And it opens up a whole lot.
It really does. And this is a tool that even families can use. So if you, especially with younger kids who may have a hard time remembering details of their days, of their experiences, you can say, well, take a picture of everything you do, and next, when I see you on Sunday, then show me. And that just leads a open window to a whole bunch of questions that you can ask them. The same thing for if your child is struggling with something but doesn't know how to say, well, next time you're in that situation, just take a picture for me of what's going on around you. And then you can look at the picture and then ask them the questions so who is this and what happened next? And they'll start to open up with their ideas and thoughts.
One child was so scared. I gave him that project to do, and he went around and took pictures of his neighborhood and how his neighborhood was changing from Brownsville as we know it, and how it's progressively changing, and how that scares him, because where is he going to go if rent increases and all these people are moving out? What's happening? So I was able to use psychoeducation to help him understand what's really going on and what he can do to help himself.
And the thing about that story, it really highlights how much kids are taking in that we may not think they're paying attention to. And you would hear that and think the child may be like a teenager, but we have these conversations,
10-year-olds,
9?
-year-olds.
And so although they're very young, they're still able to take in and feel of all of these adult problems that we see and we chat about, but they don't have the words to explain why these things are making them nervous, or even to ask, what is exactly happening in my neighborhood. So this is why, using art, pictures, drawings, other types of engagement with not just the academic ideas is very, very helpful with building coping skills and communication with your children and families.
One big challenging one is introducing communication at family dinner. So if the family can choose one night a week where they will meet for dinner and talk about their positive and negative thoughts that they experienced during the week, that's been a challenge for me, and I think it really helps.
Right. Easy way to ask, too, is what is the high of the day and the low of the day? And you can explain to kids based off of temperature. The high is when it's hot and sunny and fun, and then the low is when it's really, really cold, and some people don't like the cold. So you can explain it like that to younger kids. And we have a list of other coping skills, and want to definitely open it up to questions, too. So let's go to the next slide, just so that everyone can see. So it's a little small, but a lot of the things that we've already talked about are on here. So joining a group, eating healthy foods, using cooking and baking, as well as cleaning as a way to engage your kids and build a connection. A coping skill has to have a relationship behind it, especially with kids and in a family system. So you can use small everyday experiences to then build that connection. Now, the thing with parenting, and Dr. Philippe, you can speak to this too, right? Like, you want to go to the grocery store, get your groceries, and go home. And if you bring your kid with you, sometimes it is not that straightforward. So definitely be very planful about how you use these strategies. You don't want to do it when you're just trying to cook something quick, put dinner on the table because we got to go to bed and we're already home late. This is more for when, okay, I just need to get bread and milk. Let me just bring the little one along with me because I'm only getting 2 things.
Another thing too, there are online parenting groups.
Yes.
They're very helpful. I'm actually starting one, but we could talk about that later. The group will be on Sunday evenings, but we can't talk about that right now, but it's a good idea to join a parenting group for adults. Also, the strategy I talked about before is also good for couples, to choose a night where things are discussed. Not every night, because it could be stressful for some people, but to choose one night, a date night, or whatever it may be, to talk about the goods and the bads, the goods, the bads of the week.
Right. Some other ones that we have on here are, like we talked about, the relaxation ones. Some simple things such as taking a shower and a bath. This is really fun for kids too, like giving them like the spa experience. It doesn't take a lot, and it does lift their spirits. And like if they're having a bad day, it's something they can look forward to. Or they're having a stressful day, you can add this to like a reward system. Like, okay, I know you really have this big test, then we can do this at the end of the day, just to de-stress. And that also teaches them how to care for themselves when they're older. So we talked about how to teach coping strategies to children and to our friends and families, and it's really just about modeling it first. If you do it for yourself and you have little ones and teenagers in your home, they'll see you do it and then be able to put 2 and 2 together as they're getting older. That's also another conversation to have at the dinner table. You can start off with, oh yeah, when I went out, remember mommy needed her mommy time, I remember daddy needed to go with his friends. He went out because he was having his guy time, his me time. And you guys could talk about what me time is and what it can look like. Problem solving, which we talked about before, could look a variety of different things. Can you just say more about that?
In terms of which category, which population?
Let's do kids and then adults.
Okay, kids. Problem solving, well, for me the biggest one is communication. How to give the children the language to communicate with peers or parents. One technique I've taught a teenage girl is to tell a mom or a father, when you do this, I feel that, and then therefore I behave this way. To get both parties to understand how that works is critical. So I start with communication. For me, that's very important. Another one is the journaling piece. To put things on paper, and if you can't read it back to the individual, have them read it. Now, the individual also has a chance to respond in a way that's non-threatening to the individual. And just to teach them that communication, the words to use and what not, the words not to use. When you call me this, I feel that. So can we please try to find a way to avoid this interaction? Something like that.
And also using family and friends and your extended network, whether it's your church members or people you know from social groups, to help with these. Because when we're talking about adolescents or kids expressing themselves to adults, we don't want it to be seen in a way that is disrespectful. Right. And so if you need assistance with that, you can use someone who is very, very close with the person involved in the conversation. And this works well for adults too, like bringing that third party in so that that other person knows that it's non-threatening, that we're not trying to gang up on you. We're really just trying to talk about how the things that happen within our relationship make us feel and what we're experiencing.
Another good one is give the child an opportunity to play a part in the problem solving. For example, the child might say, well, I would feel comfortable if you could go out bowling. But you might feel, oh my God, it's Friday night, I'm tired, I don't want to do. But just take the time and just try. You know, as adults, we also have to play our part when we're dealing with children. So that's another one. Give them an opportunity to give an idea, or just listen to them, or whatever they may feel. They may want to stay in and just create music with a parent, or whatever they do. Try it. Even PlayStation, just try it. Learn something new.
Right, and they really tap into the things that they enjoy and tap into the things that that other person finds as important. And also making sure that you are finding ways to use these things to support yourself so that you can support someone else. Because we can't pour from an empty cup. And sometimes when our cups are full, we need another cup to help us support the full cup. So you want to definitely expand your ideas of what can bring you joy and fill you up when supporting other people. So, Ms. Mills, we definitely wanted to leave room for questions. So I'm not sure if there were any yet, or if anyone in the crowd had questions yet.
Can I give one more coping
Yeah, go
skill?
ahead.
Especially parents with younger children. Now with technology, a lot of these kids are into TikTok.
Yes.
You may take the opportunity to show them and participate in the TikToking to show them what's appropriate and not appropriate. And you'd be surprised what comes out of it.
And we were also talking about that with the social media of kids using social media as an escape. But they're also saying that this is the way they can engage with their friends in a way that's not scary due to like the pandemic concerns. The thing about it is there's truth to that, and as Dr. Philippe said, there's like so many things that can come out of that that may be harmful to your child. So I would say get an account just to see what it looks like. Especially with TikTok, you don't necessarily have to post to be able to engage with it, but you'll start to see what videos kind of are surfacing. You'll start to see the trends and the, what are they called? When it's like, well, the viral videos and like the viral trends, the dances, and all these other things that are happening, just so you have an idea of what to approach with your child and what's going on in their lives.
The whole language around views and all of that popularity. But the trick is, well, one thing that must be done, it has to be monitored.
Yes.
The amount of time they spend using these devices to post, and it has to be monitored, especially with the younger kids.
Right, kids under 13 really should only have like, they talk about it being like an hour tops, and then they become smaller amounts of numbers as the child's age is smaller. Which is hard in our society now, but you definitely want to build in screenless time for your kids and put limits around it, so they're not just using it and only using it only. Also,
there's an impact of technology light on sleep.
Yes.
So try to remove the technology, the devices, an hour and a half before sleep time. That would be also that's also helpful.
Right, because the blue light of your phones, and this is helpful to all of us, the blue light of your phones changes the way your brain produces sleep hormones, and then that makes it harder to fall asleep over long periods of time. It may still be like, oh, I'm able to fall asleep with it now, but if you were to keep up the same level of engagement with your phone prior to sleep and saw how your sleep pattern was 6 months later, you would see a change. So just keeping that in mind for our own sleep habits as well.
As you were talking, you mentioned self-harming behaviors, cutting. It's interesting. I have a young lady that I work with, and she wasn't quite a cutter. At least I don't know if she cuts, but what I did notice was that she had like a cut on her hand, and she kept on like picking at the scab. And I was like, doesn't this hurt? And she's like, no. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, but it's really raw. Like, what's going on? And now that I'm listening to you, I'm like, okay, there may actually be something greater. And I know that she does have mental health issues. So I'm wondering, how would I have a conversation with her, not to offend, but to kind of educate her, to get her to understand that, hey, this may not be good.
That's a very tough question, and a very, very good question. The first thing is to understand it. To us, cutting ourselves is hurtful, right? And we bleed. But to others who engage in this behavior, it's a stress release. So, one is to have a conversation with the child, to help them understand. Oh, an adult. It was same, adult or child. To help them understand how dangerous this is. They may cut too far down, infections can set in. Also, this is the time to introduce them to a therapist, especially if it's an adult, because usually we see this behavior in children or adolescents. We rarely see it in adults. So there might be something else going on.
And you did say that you know that she may be struggling with a few things, and if you guys work together, you can also use that as the end. Like, is something happening at work that's stressing? If you notice like the activities happening more, maybe during certain periods of the day, maybe you could use that. Oh, client, sorry.
Yeah,
It's a picking.
there's a picking. By the way, that's a maladaptive coping mechanism also.
Right, that's what that one is called. But like you said, she's already a client, so it'll definitely be the psychoeducation route, which is just informing her about how dangerous that can be and how that can impact her health in like a long-term way, and then offering some other ways for her to deal with whatever sensations she's having when she does that.
I have a niece that does the breakup of a parent intensify the COVID-19 issue with regards to mental health? If so, could you just address that?
The breaking up of the family is very, very harmful to children, or they react in a very negative way. Sometimes the children can spiral out of control. What you will see is they sometimes internalize this incident or whatever happened with the family, because they begin to think it's their fault. So sometimes these children, what you'll see is they'll get sad, or they'll get depressed, or they begin to act out. So it depends on the child, but it's very, very important to pay attention to that. It's a very good question, by the way.
And
For example, like, there's two children. The daughter with the mother, the father with the son, and it had an occasion where I heard the father basically scream at the daughter, and I'm like, that's not him, you know. I just wanted to, you know, is that a reaction also for that split with the children?
it definitely sounds like it, especially if there was a split in parenting, like responsibilities, like you're saying. Like now it's like one with one versus. Yeah, it definitely sounds like each person in the example, everyone in this family is definitely feeling an increased amount of stress. And this goes back to what we were saying about the support of the people around. So whether it's the support for dad, right? Because it seems like he may be having his own reactions and may not be able to show up the way that he could for his kids at this time because he's already stressed. Then how do everyone involved on the outside support each person? So whether that's sitting down and telling the kids, like, this isn't your fault, or like taking them out and making sure they have positive experiences on the weekends, or is it talking to dad, making sure like, oh, do you need help? Do you need me to bring dinner? Do you need a pickup? Do you need help with like summer clothes? Like whatever it is, and then trying to find some resources and or within the family or community to help the family. Does that make sense?
What you'll find too in certain families, there's something called pathological dyads or triads, where, for example, there's the good parent and the bad parent. But keep in mind of the parent that's using this for their own secondary gain, where I'm the cool parent, I have the resources to take the child to certain places. But at the same time, well, mommy's not doing this with you, so, So they'll use it for their own secondary gains, plotting something for the future. And that creates a problem for the child, and there's a splitting. Sometimes it happens with 2 or 3 children. So you have these pathological dyads, triads against the mom or against the dad. So we have to pay attention to the parents causing these problems for the children.
Hi, I'm sorry I came in on the tail end of the presentation, but I came in when Angela, you were talking about the phone and how important it is to take the phone away before they go to the bed. There's this little girl who we got connected to recently. She's 11, and she does not go to bed until 3 or 5 in the morning. And so she has the phone on. She does not have any friends, but she'll say she's talking to her friends. I think there's a long history. I'm getting pieces and pieces of it from her father. And so, like, if something happens, then he will tell me something else about her. But she has become very close to the family, and she has been coming over on weekends. But it's such a challenge working with her. And so, like, certain things that we'll say to him, okay, I'm doing this with her, so keep that going. And then she goes back with him for the rest of the week, and it goes all back. And I keep trying to say to him, she's manipulative. I think there's things he needs to do. He took her off her medication because he said, oh, I noticed she's shaking. I said, but you don't stop her medication. You talk to the doctor about that. So she was home, I think it was one Monday when they were off. I was at work. She was home with my other daughter. And her sessions are virtual because of COVID. She's not going in. And so she was on a conference call with her counselor, the psychiatrist, and she was putting down the phone, and the lady kept on saying to her, hold the phone up, I have to see you when I'm talking to you. And she just puts the phone down. So when I came home, my daughter told me about it, and I said to her, oh, I heard you had your session today, but I heard you weren't being very cooperative. And she said, but I don't need her. I don't need to talk to her. Anything I want, I can talk to my dad. He'll take care of it. But I see her going backwards. She has no friends. She gets in fights every day. She has started to connect with my granddaughter, and now they don't speak anymore because my granddaughter said, Grandma, it's too much work to be with her. So, I don't want her to feel left out, but my granddaughter's like, I can't be with her. So, any points on how I can kind of push this into the father's head that he has, because her mother was going to put her into foster care. So the father said no, because the mother couldn't deal with it anymore. The mother is still going to therapy, and the 6-year-old sister is still in therapy, but the 11-year-old, they're having such a hard time even getting her out. So I'm basically stuck with her, and it's a lot of work.
Okay, is there a way to get the father in therapy for himself so he could begin to understand some of the dynamics of the things he's doing that's impacting negatively on the child?
Okay, so I will make that suggestion to him.
Yeah, this definitely sounds like a situation where, like, the parent who's taking charge needs more education. And when kids will say things like, oh, I don't need my therapist anymore, it's usually because they got a message of that from someone else. So once the medication stopped, now it's like, oh, I'm better. I'm not taking the medication anymore, so then why do I have to talk to her? It's all fine. Without the being able to see what the other behaviors are, like the lack of insight of what her behaviors are doing with other people. So I definitely agree with what Dr. Philippe said, for sure.
And I guess she's manipulating him so much that he was picking up her one Sunday evening, and he said, get everything together. She got home, she realized she left her charger. So he went to work. It's a very sad situation with how it's going on. So he went to work, and she's calling him and telling him that she needs to get to Queens to get her charger. And he said, no, you have to wait until I get home. So she goes home, and she just do a cup of noodles and just poured it on herself. So then he had to be in the hospital there for all evening. And I'm saying to him, she needs to be going out to see someone regularly and back on her meds.
Right, so it definitely sounds like she may need like a higher level of care at this point, whereas like the virtual works well for people who have been in therapy for a longer period of time. Like the symptoms are kind of managed, you kind of understand the situation are like fully.
Actually, she has been in it for a while. She's been in therapy since she was 8. She's now 11. But now that she's with him, so I think he's playing the good parent,
right,
compared to the mom who insisted and was the bad parent. So
right.
Him playing the good parent is figuring, no, I think I just have to talk to her. I think I just...
The television doesn't always work for that because there's a lot of issues that have to be contained that can't be contained if the child's in the house doing the session. Whereas when you come to the office, there's this about like the therapeutic relationship, like it's these nuances that happen when you're in a certain type of place. You kind of can set those boundaries, start to teach those boundaries within the confines of an office space or a confines of a treatment team where the psychiatrist and the therapist are there as soon as the child gets there. Now it's like, okay, we could talk to dad, we could talk to the child and address all the issues at once. But once it's kind of like televisit, this person works for this agency, this person works over here, it's a lot harder to keep on top of like all the factors that you're describing. So maybe looking for something a little different in that direction too.
So I like his suggestion. I'm going to tell the dad, because maybe stop worrying about you go into therapy, and that, I guess, will educate him enough to see that sometimes you got to take your heart out of it and be practical.
What you eventually want to do also is to eventually bring the father and the child together in therapy, family therapy, but it will be just the two of them with a therapist who's very knowledgeable with splitting, because there's something this father's doing to cause a lot of pathologies for this child. And also the therapist cannot allow themselves to be manipulated by the dad.
Thank you. I can take it back to him. And stop worrying myself.
Good afternoon. Yeah, I just want to thank you for the first seminar that you did, and I was telling about a family member of mine that was, thank God she started going to therapy now, and she's doing much better. Also, I have a niece-in-law. Her son just committed suicide in March, and she just found a suicide note that he wrote. She was in the basement going through his stuff, and she found a suicide note that she wrote. So now she blaming herself for him commit suicide. So now she shut everybody out. She don't want to talk to nobody, and she doesn't want to go to work. So her uncle called me now for me to go over to Long Island to sit with her and talk with her, but I can't get her on the phone either. So I'm just going to keep trying to reach her and, to see what's going on, because she's out of it now, because she's blaming herself now. Because he committed suicide the day before his birthday, it would have been 26. Wow. So,
We could speak about mobile crisis, and that could also help your other situation as well. So there is a service, and Dr. you can explain it more since you kind of have all the background on that one.
There's something called mobile crisis, and this is a number you call. NYC. Well, you can call, and they could send someone to the person's home to make a well check, some kind of check on that individual, and you explain to them what's going on. That sounds like a very serious situation, because what I would be thinking about is the mom herself becoming suicidal and blaming herself for what happened. So mobile crisis, the 1-800, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but NYC, well, it's advertised a lot on TV.
Right. They'll know the number as well. Your unions, insurance companies, doctors, they're very well versed with the numbers as well. So if you can't find it with a quick Google search or ask a friend, you can always call a provider and they will be able to give you the number right away.
And mobile crisis responds within 24 hours. That's the key thing here. Yeah.
One question. The same little girl I'm talking about, I noticed she's very violent to younger kids. Out of the blue, she'll hurt them, kick them in their stomach, punch them. To kids who are much younger than her, like really little kids, yes.
Well, many things come to my mind when I hear that, but what is she doing is also projecting her anger towards a target, which makes her feel better about herself too. But that could also be dangerous, because she's harming someone else. And that in itself can escalate to homicidal ideations. So this has to be monitored.
Yeah, that's definitely an indicator too of change in mental health when you start to see kids take out like very interesting behaviors, whether it's aggression or even over-sexualized behavior on either kids that are younger than them, animals, insects. That is also a very big red flag for mental wellness concerns.
I have a question. I know at least 3 people who are in sessions, and at least one of them who are still hearing voices as much as they're going to therapy. And I was talking to the individual only about 2 days ago, I think, and they mentioned to me that I've been in therapy now for about 6-7 years, but sometimes I'm still hearing voices that's telling me to do things that I don't think is right for them to do.
Right, those are called,
Can
those are called perceptual disturbances, whether they're auditory, which are the ones you hear, or visual hallucinations. So talk therapy is good for a lot of things. There are various different models that can help with a lot of your attitudes, your thoughts, your emotions, being able to communicate and verbalize these things. However, when you start to have these visual and auditory hallucinations, now we're talking about the way the brain is actually producing chemicals and hormones, which has to be addressed with medication. That's a psychiatrist or a nurse practitioner. Therapists and psychologists, whether we're mental health counselors, social workers, are not licensed to address the issues through medication. What their therapist could do is help them to understand like reality testing strategies, like, okay, where are you, who's around, what can you touch, to kind of bring them back when they're starting to have those experiences. However, the long-term and more effective treatment for that is definitely a medication route.
And whoever they're seeing in therapy can link them to a psychiatrist or a nurse practitioner.
I think the therapist should, but apparently that hasn't been happening. That hasn't been happening at all.
Then now you know. So also you could call their insurance company and have the insurance company give you one of their providers that's nearest to that person's home, or the insurance company can give you someone as well.
Yes, because that individual was in the ER for about was hospitalized probably for about 3 days, because they just stopped talking. The voices are making them do crazy things. So they checked themselves into the ER. And they were in-house for about 3 days before they were being discharged. But I found that I'm thinking you should be going to a psychiatrist, like you said, but they went right back to the therapist.
Right, but my question is this. If they were hospitalized and they're hearing voices, why didn't the hospital give them medication?
I wouldn't be surprised if they did get the medication, but the thing is, when you go back to the therapist, from what I'm learning, when they go back to the therapist, oh, why did they put you in that? You don't need this. So there is something behind that.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking the therapist should take that to another level and send them to either see a psychiatrist or something of the sort. But the therapist is basically taking them off the meds that they're being put on.
So I think that's a good point to say how we're all very different in this field, right? That's fine. We're all very different in this field, and like doctors in any other profession, right? There are different viewpoints, different perspectives of how to work with different issues. And so you definitely have to help your family and friends vet their therapists, vet their psychiatrists, right? Because like I said, we all work from different perspectives, we all have different opinions, and unfortunately, not everyone can separate their person from their work. So you definitely want to support family and friends if they're in these situations, and it sounds kind of fishy, kind of like this example, to then seek a different option.
They're all on this thing. I think it's government mandated, where they're doing what they call GDR, the gradual dose reduction thing. And so I think what happens sometimes in these cases, because the therapist is not seeing the person daily and seeing see the changes in the behavior, whether it's improving or it's worsening. And so that day that you come in for your session is a good day for you. So you present all these positives and you seem to have the answers right. So they say, okay, I can continue to do a gradual dose reaction, not knowing that maybe for the past 3 weeks this person has been way out there in left field, and so 2 days before coming in they might take the medication, and they come in and they're so good, and then they say to you, oh, the doctor added this, and the therapist say, why did they add that? You are this and you're that, you're that. But honestly, they're mandated now to do gradual dose reduction. But what can happen? Families have a say. You can intervene. You can say no. My family member has been on this for ABCD years. he's been doing good, I don't want it reduced. Because sometimes they do the gradual dose reduction, and then when they try to up the dose again, it does nothing for them. Now you have to switch them and start them on something all over. But as I said, sometimes because they're not seeing the daily behaviors, so that missing that assessment can really throw them off in trying to stay with the mandates that are being put forward now.
I'm not sure if I can say.
You have something to say about that?
I think professionally, people see things differently. But for me, my patients, people I work with, I try to provide the optimal level of care. So I will be assessing for the good and also the bad. I'm constantly checking for suicidality, constantly checking for all types of perceptual disturbances. There's visual, there's auditory, there's tactile, there's olfactory, there's even taste hallucinations. So it's about caring, and also the level of care the provider's providing to that patient or the family.
The level of importance of the provider you're working with speaking with other people. And this is really important I guess it's important for adult and child therapists, because for working being a child therapist primarily, it has really honed in the importance of me speaking to just more than one person. I don't ever just talk to the parents. I need to talk to at least 2 people at school, and if you go to after school, I need to speak to somebody there too, because I need to understand what it looks like in all different settings. And to speak to your point, they'll be doing a whole gamut of different things in basketball practice than they are at home. So that's the same thing for adult care. Unfortunately, adults don't have to allow for collateral interactions. However, a skilled clinician can start to build the client's understanding of why this is important. Yeah, that one person that continues to drive you to my office every time you come, have them come upstairs. Just have a chat. I would love to meet them. You want to look for this in the providers, doctors as well, the providers that you are sending your family to, that you're interacting with, right?
There are times I work with adults, and although let's say the wife is my patient, I sometimes have the wife sign a consent at intake so that I could speak to the husband. Not on things every day, but if in case of an emergency. So I kind of put that in place, because these days mental health is becoming, it's important, it's critical.
Can you just talk about why a person would be answering a question with a question? You always ask a question, and before you answer, you have to ask another question.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is resistance. Obviously, the person does not want to answer the question, or it might be something I call emotionally loaded. They may not be able to answer it at that moment, so they try to deflect, another defense mechanism. They deflect from the question, because something about the question is too emotionally stimulating. It's too much. But as a clinician, you gotta somehow remember that and come at it a different way or another day, or it could be within the same day, but not to always force the patient to talk, because it might be destructive.
Are there any more questions? Okay, we thank you very much for the information. I especially thank you because I have something to run forward with to help my situation. I don't think this should be the last, because there are so many, not just children, but adults. There are a lot of us out there who are going through something, and it is so needed now more than ever. People just aren't finding the ways to cope. We look at the crime rates and we see all that's going on. So I do want to extend on behalf of the health ministry here our profound gratitude. And I know this August 13th, we'll be having a street fair, and we deeply, deeply, deeply appreciate it if you guys would journey with us on that day, and we could have a home booth where maybe something like that, where people are so busy and not looking at each other, no one will be watching that person that, oh, they're going in there to talk to them. Because, we still haven't gotten over the stigma of what our mental illness can cripple you moving forward. So I am so appreciative, and on behalf of the health ministry, we do thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.